I'm a 27-year-old guy, and this story revolves around my family, specifically my mom and my younger sister, Lily, who's 24 now. Growing up, I always felt like something was a little off, but it wasn't until I got older that I started putting the pieces together. Looking back, the signs were always there, starting from when I was a kid. One of my earliest memories involves my birthday. Every year, my grandparents would send me a card with some money tucked inside. It wasn't a huge amount, maybe $50 or $100, but as a kid, that felt like hitting the jackpot. I'd get excited thinking about all the toys or games I could buy, but almost every year, that money would somehow disappear. My mom had a habit of taking it, claiming it was for the family or to help with bills. Being a kid, I didn't question it much. She'd tell me it was something I was doing to help everyone, and I wanted to be a good son. But then I started noticing a pattern. Around my 10th birthday, I remember one incident that stuck out. My grandparents had sent me $100 that year, and it vanished just like always. A week later, Lily, who was only 7 at the time, showed up with a brand new dollhouse and a bunch of accessories. It was the kind of setup I knew we couldn't really afford, and it clicked. That money wasn't going to bills. I asked my mom about it, and she brushed me off, saying, Lily deserves to feel special too. That became the recurring theme of my childhood. I'd get something, and somehow it would end up being for Lily instead. My dad was hardly ever around to see it happening. He worked long hours at a factory job, and when he was home, he was too tired to notice. My mom ran the house, and questioning her decisions was like walking into a minefield. Even when I did muster the courage to bring it up, she'd always turn it around on me, making me feel like I was selfish for even asking. By the time I hit my teenage years, I was starting to see the bigger picture. My mom's favoritism wasn't subtle, it was glaring. At 16, I got $200 for my birthday from my grandparents. I had big plans for that money. I wanted to save up for a gaming console I'd been dreaming about for months. But before I could even stash the cash, it was gone. My mom had taken it, saying it was going towards something important. A few weeks later, I found out what that important thing was. Lily had a shiny new tablet, and she wasn't shy about showing it off. That was the first time I really tried to stand up for myself. I confronted my mom, asking why she'd taken my money to buy something for Lily. Her response was predictable. She accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, reminding me that family comes first. That phrase, family comes first, was her go-to justification for everything. I didn't win that argument, but it stuck with me. My grandparents started to notice the dynamic too. They began giving me gifts directly instead of handing over cash to my mom. Of course, that didn't sit well with her. She called them controlling and claimed they were trying to undermine her authority. It created a lot of tension, and eventually they stopped giving me money altogether to avoid more conflict. Over the years, it became clearer that I was always expected to be the bigger person. Whenever Lily got into trouble, I was the one told to step in and help. If she wanted something, I was supposed to sacrifice. My mom framed it as my role as the older sibling, but it felt more like I was just a second-class citizen in my own home. By the time I turned 18, I was ready to move out and start my own life. My grandparents gave me $1,000 as a birthday gift to help with college expenses. It felt like a fresh start until my mom got her hands on it. She insisted it would go into a college savings account for me, and I believed her. Later, I found out the truth. That money had paid for Lily's dance camp that summer. It was the last straw for me. Once I went off to college, I started distancing myself from my family. I focused on my studies and built a life for myself, far away from the house where everything seemed to revolve around Lily. I didn't go home much, and when I did, it was always the same story. Lily's achievements, Lily's needs, Lily's life. My mom acted like I should just be happy for her and move on, but it was hard to forget all those years of being pushed aside. Now I'm 27 and financially independent. I've built a career I'm proud of and don't rely on my family for anything. But recently I've been reflecting on all those moments and wondering if it's time to finally confront my mom about everything. Part of me thinks it's pointless, she'll never admit she did anything wrong. But another part of me feels like I owe it to myself to say something, even if it's just for closure. The memories I've held onto for so long deserve to be addressed, and maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop letting her narrative control the story. Update 1. A few weeks ago, I decided I couldn't keep holding everything in anymore. I've spent years replaying the moments in my head, money disappearing, Lily getting gifts paid for with what was supposed to be mine, the constant dismissals from my mom, and I finally reached my breaking point. I told myself that the next family dinner would be the time I'd bring it all up. I was ready to lay everything out, no matter how awkward it got. The dinner started like any other. My mom had made her signature lasagna, Lily was chatting about her new job, and my dad was mostly quiet, nodding along. I sat there, trying to keep my composure while the small talk went on. It felt surreal, like I was about to drop a bomb no one saw coming. When the moment felt right, I asked my mom if she remembered all the birthday money I used to get from my grandparents. She barely glanced up from her plate and said something vague about how generous they always were. That's when I pressed, asking her why the money never stayed with me and always seemed to disappear. The table went quiet. Lily stopped mid-sentence, looking confused, and my dad finally looked up, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. My mom, on the other hand, didn't miss a beat. She waved me off, saying I must be misremembering or exaggerating. According to her, the money always went toward important things for the family. That's when I pulled out my journal. I had it with me, tucked under the chair, just in case I needed to back up my claims. I flipped to a page and read out the entry from my 16th birthday, detailing how the $200 from my grandparents was used to buy Lily a tablet. My mom's face froze for a moment, but then she quickly recovered, insisting I was blowing things out of proportion. Lily looked genuinely confused. She asked what I was talking about, and when I explained that the tablet was bought with my birthday money, she looked shocked. She stammered that she had no idea and apologized if that was true, but I could tell she wasn't fully convinced. My mom, however, doubled down. She said I was being petty for bringing this up after so many years and accused me of trying to stir up drama. My dad stayed quiet at first, but when I brought up the $1,000 my grandparents gave me for college and how it ended up funding Lily's dance camp instead, his jaw dropped. He asked my mom if that was true. She tried to deflect, saying she'd made hard choices to keep the family happy and that it wasn't easy balancing everything on her own, but he didn't look convinced. Things escalated quickly from there. Lily started getting defensive, saying she never asked for any of this and that it wasn't fair for me to hold it against her. I told her it wasn't about her, it was about the choices our mom made. My mom, meanwhile, was getting visibly upset. She called me ungrateful and accused me of turning my grandparents against her, saying they had always been too controlling with their money. That's when I decided to bring my grandparents into the conversation. I called them on speakerphone right there at the table and asked if they remembered the $1,000 they gave me for college. My grandma didn't hesitate. She said she remembered it clearly and had been heartbroken when she found out it was used for something else. She said she and my grandpa had always suspected my mom wasn't being truthful about where the money went. Hearing that seemed to flip a switch in my mom. She started crying, saying she'd done her best, and that I was ungrateful for all the sacrifices she'd made. My dad tried to calm her down, but she wasn't having it. She kept saying I was ruining the family by dredging up the past and making everyone uncomfortable. I couldn't sit there any longer. I told her I needed time to process everything and left the dinner early. On my way home, my phone started blowing up. My mom was sending text after text, accusing me of trying to destroy our family and turning everyone against her. Lily sent a message too, apologizing again, but also asking me not to make things worse for our mom. Feeling overwhelmed, I decided to share the story on Reddit. I laid out everything, how my mom used my birthday money, the favoritism toward Lily, and how the dinner had gone. I wasn't expecting much, maybe a few comments telling me I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did, but the response was overwhelming. The post went viral, and thousands of people chimed in. Most of them were supportive, telling me I had every right to confront my mom and set boundaries. Some even shared similar stories about favoritism and financial manipulation in their own families. It was validating in a way I didn't expect. Now I'm left wondering what to do next. My mom's texts haven't stopped, and Lily has gone quiet. My dad hasn't reached out either, which isn't surprising. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm not alone in this. Whatever happens next, I know I can't keep letting this go unchecked. Update 2. The aftermath of the family dinner turned out to be more chaotic than I expected. Within days, my mom had gone into full damage control mode, reaching out to every extended family member she could think of. According to her, I was the unreasonable one, dredging up old grievances just to make her look bad. She painted herself as the victim, saying she had sacrificed so much for the family, only to have me throw it back in her face. That's when the calls and texts started. Cousins, aunts, and even a couple of family friends were suddenly reaching out to me, urging me to be the bigger person and make things right. One of my aunts told me outright that my mom was crying every day and couldn't understand why I was being so cruel. Another relative reminded me how hard my mom had worked to raise both me and Lily, and that I should focus on the good times instead of dwelling on the past. It was overwhelming, but not everyone took her side. My grandparents were furious when they found out what was happening. They called me to say they were proud of me for finally standing up to her and told me not to let the pressure get to me. During that call, my grandpa shared a few more details about my mom's history with money. Apparently, the financial manipulation went back even further than I thought. When I was a toddler, my mom had convinced my grandparents to give her money for my daycare fees, only for them to later find out she was using it to pay off other debts. Hearing that just added fuel to the fire. Meanwhile, Lily sent me another message, apologizing again for unknowingly benefiting from my birthday money. But then she followed it up by asking me not to ruin our mom's reputation. She said our mom was struggling emotionally, and that this whole situation was tearing the family apart. I didn't know how to respond. On one hand, I wanted to believe her apology was sincere. On the other hand, it felt like she was still defending my mom's actions, even if she claimed she didn't know about them at the time. All of this pushed me to dig a little deeper into my finances. I started reviewing everything I could from my college years, especially the so-called college savings account my mom had always mentioned. It didn't take long to uncover another surprise. Turns out, not only was the $1,000 from my grandparents used for Lily's dance camp, but a portion of my college fund had also been spent on her extracurricular activities. I found receipts for things like private lessons and travel expenses for competitions, none of which had anything to do with me. When I confronted my mom about it, she didn't deny it. Instead, she claimed she had no choice and that everything she did was out of love for the family. She told me I wouldn't understand how hard it was to be a single parent most of the time, with my dad always working long hours. She kept saying she only wanted the best for both of us, and that her decisions were never meant to hurt me. It wasn't the explanation I was looking for. Feeling overwhelmed, I decided to start therapy. My grandparents actually encouraged me to do it, saying it might help me make sense of everything I was feeling. In therapy, I started unpacking not just the financial issues, but also the years of favoritism and emotional manipulation. My therapist suggested writing a letter to my mom to express everything I wanted to say, but in a way that wouldn't escalate the conflict further. I spent hours drafting that letter. I poured my heart into it, detailing how her actions had made me feel undervalued for years. I explained how the constant favoritism toward Lily had strained our relationship and why I needed to set boundaries for my own well-being. Before giving it to her, I showed it to my dad. He read it carefully and, for the first time, admitted he had failed to protect me from the favoritism. He apologized, saying he should have stepped in sooner but didn't realize how bad it had gotten. When I handed the letter to my mom, she barely glanced at it before dismissing it outright. She called it a waste of time and accused me of trying to punish her for things she couldn't change. It was disheartening, but at that point, I wasn't expecting much from her. I updated my story on Reddit again, sharing everything that had happened since the family dinner. The response was overwhelming. People flooded the comments with support, telling me I was doing the right thing by standing up for myself. Many suggested I consider going no contact with my mom altogether. It was something I had been thinking about, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to take that step. Meanwhile, things with Lily were getting tense. She started pulling away, and our conversations became less frequent. It was clear the situation was driving a wedge between us, which only added to the complexity of everything. For now, I've decided to limit contact with my mom. I haven't gone fully no contact yet, but I'm keeping my distance. I don't know what the next step will be, but I'm starting to realize that protecting my peace might mean leaving some relationships behind. Update 3. After limiting contact with my mom, I realized I needed to get a clear picture of what she had done with my finances over the years. It wasn't just about the birthday money or the college savings anymore. It felt like there was more I hadn't uncovered. So, I decided to go through everything, from my bank accounts to my student loans, to see if there were any other surprises. It didn't take long to find something that stopped me in my tracks. While reviewing my student loan documents, I noticed a loan in my name that I didn't remember taking out. The amount wasn't small either, it was over $10,000. After digging through the details, I found that the loan had been taken out during my first year of college and had my mom listed as the cosigner. I was shocked. I had no memory of agreeing to this loan, and it was clear that my mom had taken it out without telling me. At this point, I knew I needed professional help. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in financial disputes and explained the situation. The lawyer confirmed that what my mom did was illegal and that I had every right to take action. They walked me through my options, including filing a formal complaint to dispute the loan and potentially pursuing legal charges against my mom. Armed with this new information, I decided to confront her again. This time, I didn't go to her house. I called her and laid everything out. I told her I had found the loan and asked her to explain. At first, she tried to deny it, but when I read off the details, including the date it was signed and the lender's name, she broke down. She admitted to taking out the loan, claiming she was desperate and didn't know what else to do. She said the money had gone toward covering household expenses and some of Lily's extracurricular activities. After the call, I told my dad what I had discovered. He was furious, not just at my mom but at himself for not being more involved in our family's finances. They ended up having a massive argument, which my dad later told me ended with my mom accusing him of failing to support her and leaving her to figure everything out on her own. My dad was starting to see the full extent of the damage, and it was clear he felt guilty for not stepping in sooner. Lily, meanwhile, tried to mediate. She asked me to come over and talk things out as a family, saying that everyone just wanted to move forward. I agreed to meet, but during the conversation, she inadvertently revealed more instances of favoritism that I hadn't even known about. For example, there were times when my mom had used money from my part-time job during high school to buy things for Lily, claiming it was for shared family expenses. Hearing that only added to my frustration. After the meeting, I had to make a decision. My lawyer was encouraging me to move forward with legal action, but I knew it would cause an even bigger rift in the family. My grandparents stepped in again, offering to help me financially so I wouldn't feel pressured to drop the case. They told me that standing up for myself was the right thing to do, even if it was difficult. At the same time, my story was gaining even more traction online. My latest update on Reddit had gone viral, and while most people were supportive, there were some who accused me of being too harsh or not understanding my mom's struggles. It was hard not to let those comments get to me, but I tried to focus on the advice from those who had been through similar situations. A few days later, my mom called me, begging me to drop the issue. She promised to make things right if I didn't take legal action. She even offered to start paying me back for the loan, but I could tell she was only trying to avoid the legal consequences. I told her I needed time to think about it. That's when my dad suggested we hold a family meeting to try and resolve everything. I was hesitant, but I agreed. The meeting was a disaster from the start. My mom kept shifting the blame, accusing me of overreacting and making her look bad. Lily, who had been trying to stay neutral, finally snapped and accused me of ruining everything for the family. My dad tried to mediate, but it was clear no one was on the same page. By the end of the meeting, I knew there was no way I could back down. My mom wasn't willing to take accountability, and Lily was too caught up in the idea that I was somehow the bad guy. I decided right then that I was going to move forward with legal action. Since then, I've been leaning heavily on my grandparents and close friends for support. They've been my rock through all of this, reminding me that it's okay to prioritize my own well-being. It's been a tough road, but I'm determined to reclaim my autonomy and finally put an end to the years of manipulation. Update 4. After discovering the fraudulent loan my mom took out in my name, I officially filed a formal complaint. The process was nerve-wracking, but my lawyer reassured me that I was doing the right thing. The complaint triggered a legal investigation, and within days, my mom received a notice informing her of the situation. This set off a chain reaction that shook my family to its core. When my dad found out I had gone through with legal action, he was furious. He called me, demanding to know why I had taken such an extreme step without consulting him first. I reminded him that this wasn't just about family disagreements, my financial future was at stake. He eventually calmed down, but it was clear he was struggling to process the fallout. My mom, on the other hand, completely shut down. She refused to speak to me, telling my dad to handle the situation while she wallowed in self-pity. Lily quickly took sides, standing firmly with my mom. She sent me a series of messages accusing me of being vindictive and obsessed with ruining the family dynamic. She claimed I was overreacting and should have just spoken to mom privately to work things out. It was frustrating, especially since Lily had been apologetic just a few weeks earlier. Now, it seemed like she was doubling down on the idea that I was the problem. Meanwhile, my extended family got involved again. My mom, true to form, called up every relative she could think of, spinning the story to make herself look like the victim. Within days, I was being bombarded with texts and calls from aunts, uncles, and cousins, all urging me to let it go for the sake of family peace. Some even accused me of being cruel for putting my mom through the stress of a legal investigation. But not everyone bought into her narrative. My grandparents, once again, came to my defense. They called me to share more stories from my childhood that highlighted my mom's pattern of prioritizing Lily over me. For instance, during one Christmas, my mom had taken the money my grandparents gave me to buy presents for Lily, leaving me with nothing but a pair of socks. Hearing these stories only reinforced my decision to move forward with the legal case. The court noticed my mom received escalated tensions even further. She called my dad in tears, blaming me for tearing the family apart and saying she couldn't believe I would go this far. My dad, trying to play mediator, arranged for us all to sit down and talk things through. I reluctantly agreed, hoping it might help clear the air. The meeting was a disaster from the start. My mom opened with a dramatic monologue about how everything she did was for the family and how ungrateful I was for not seeing that. Lily chimed in, accusing me of being jealous of her and trying to destroy our mom out of spite. I calmly explained the facts, how my mom had taken out a loan in my name without my consent, how she had misused my birthday money for years, and how her actions had left me with financial burdens I never asked for. But it didn't matter. They weren't interested in the truth. They were focused on protecting their version of events. At one point, my dad tried to step in, suggesting we all compromise and move forward. But I refused to back down. I told them this wasn't something I could sweep under the rug. My mom stormed out of the meeting, and Lily followed, leaving my dad sitting there looking defeated. After that meeting, I decided to go temporarily no contact with both my mom and Lily. I needed to protect my mental health, and the constant guilt-tripping and accusations weren't helping. My grandparents and close friends were my lifeline during this time, encouraging me to stay strong and reminding me that I wasn't alone in this fight. The drama spilled over onto social media after I posted another update on Reddit. The post went viral, and while most commenters were supportive, a few criticized me for pursuing legal action against my own mom. Still, the overwhelming majority validated my decision, sharing their own stories of family betrayal and encouraging me to see it through to the end. Then came the next twist. My mom tried to settle things out of court. She offered to repay part of the loan if I dropped the complaint. It was tempting, if only because it might have ended the ordeal sooner, but I couldn't ignore the bigger picture. This wasn't just about the money, it was about accountability. Accepting a partial repayment felt like letting her off the hook for everything she had done. Lily didn't make things easier. She sent me a long, angry message accusing me of ruining our family and saying I was tearing apart the only people who ever truly cared about me. It stung, but it also made me realize how deeply ingrained my mom's manipulative tactics were in our family dynamic. In the end, I chose to proceed with the legal case. My mom needed to face the consequences of her actions, not just for my sake, but to send a message that this kind of behavior wasn't acceptable. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but I knew it was the right one. Update 5. The court case wrapped up quicker than I anticipated. The legal investigation confirmed that my mom had taken out the loan in my name without my consent and misused the funds. The court ordered her to repay the full amount along with additional financial restitution to cover the interest and penalties I had incurred. It felt surreal hearing the final decision, but it also brought a sense of closure. Unsurprisingly, my mom didn't take it well. She blamed me for destroying our family, insisting she had only acted out of desperation to keep things afloat. She stopped speaking to me altogether and doubled down on her victim narrative to anyone who would listen. I heard through extended family that she was telling people I had turned on her and ruined what little bond we had left. Some relatives took her side, but others, especially those who learned the full truth, reached out to me with support. Lily decided to go no contact with me after the court decision. From what I gathered, she believed I had overreacted and had blown the situation out of proportion. She fully supported my mom, claiming that I had ruined her life by dragging everything through the courts. It stung, but at this point, I wasn't surprised. Lily had always been in my mom's corner, and it didn't seem like that would change anytime soon. My dad's reaction was more complicated. He didn't agree with how my mom had handled things, but he also struggled with the fallout. After the court case, he started reaching out to me privately. He admitted that he had failed me by not stepping in sooner and promised to do better moving forward. It wasn't an instant fix, but I appreciated his efforts. For the first time, it felt like he was trying to build a real relationship with me, separate from the mess my mom had created. My mom, meanwhile, kept trying to paint herself as the victim. She even attempted to rally more extended family members to her side, but by now, most of them knew the truth. My grandparents, in particular, were not having it. They stood by me throughout the entire ordeal, celebrating my courage to stand up for myself. They even offered to help me with some of the lingering financial fallout, although I assured them I had it under control. Therapy became a cornerstone for me during this time. I had started going to process everything, but now I found myself making real progress. My therapist helped me unpack years of manipulation and favoritism, and I began to see patterns I hadn't fully understood before. It wasn't just about the money, it was about control and how my mom had always used guilt to keep me in line. Slowly but surely, I learned to prioritize my mental health and set boundaries with toxic family members. Outside of family drama, my career was taking off. I channeled all my energy into work and ended up landing a major promotion. It was a game changer, not just financially, but also in terms of my confidence. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly in control of my life. I also made the decision to go permanently no contact with my mom and Lily. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the right one for me. I knew that trying to maintain a relationship with them would only reopen old wounds, and I needed to move forward. With clear boundaries in place, I finally started to find peace. The story I shared on Reddit continued to resonate with people. My updates gained massive traction, with thousands of comments from others who had experienced similar situations. Many thanked me for sharing my journey, saying it gave them the courage to stand up for themselves too. It was humbling to see how many people related to my story and found strength in it. My dad continued to work on repairing our relationship. He started reaching out more frequently, checking in on how I was doing, and even asking about therapy. He admitted he had been blind to the favoritism for years and was determined to make up for it. While it's still a work in progress, I'm cautiously optimistic about where we're headed. Months later, something unexpected happened. Lily sent me an email. In it, she apologized for her behavior and acknowledged the unfair dynamic that had existed between us. She admitted she hadn't fully understood how much I had been sidelined growing up and expressed regret for not supporting me during the legal case. It was an emotional message, and while I appreciated the gesture, I knew I needed to proceed carefully. I wrote back, thanking her for the apology but setting clear boundaries. I told her that if we were to rebuild any kind of relationship, it would have to be on my terms. For now, I'm keeping things at a distance, but I'm open to seeing where it goes in the future. As for my mom, I haven't heard from her since the court case ended, and I don't expect to. And honestly, that's fine with me. The years of manipulation, favoritism, and guilt-tripping are behind me now, and I'm focused on building a future where I surround myself with people who truly care about me. This chapter of my life has been one of the hardest I've ever faced, but it's also been one of the most transformative. I've learned to stand up for myself, set boundaries, and prioritize my well-being. With the support of my grandparents, my friends, and even my dad, I'm finally moving forward. For the first time in a long time, I feel free.